Hi, my name is Shannon Mon from the Sports and EventTech team at Startup Bootcamp Australia. Today, we'll be interviewing Firefly Initiative, which is a company that sponsors volunteers for the time they record in their community and then sells its hours to companies looking for frictionless CSR and ESG compliance.
My name's Courtney Smith, and I'm one of the founders of the Firefly Initiative.
Hey everyone, my name is Grupel, and I'm another one of the founders of the Firefly Initiative.
Great, thank you so much. So for our first question, I was wondering if you guys could tell me about the current state of volunteering in sports and events.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting time. We've just come out of COVID, as everyone knows, and the statistics state that 30% of volunteers left the volunteering marketplace, if we can call it that, because we are framing it as a marketplace, after COVID. Volunteers are tired. They worked extra hours, longer work throughout the COVID period. And the funny thing is that we look at the way in which volunteering has generally been set up. It's about intrinsic value. I do it because I care, because I want to. What we're finding, though, is that we have a new generation of volunteers that are looking at it differently. They're looking for experiential experiences, so things like short, punchy volunteering exercises, but also they are looking at what's in it for me. It's a societal shift, and so their grandparents are looking at it completely different to how they look at it. And so we've got this large paradigm shift taking place, which we need to cater for.
And we'd say, because of that, we notice that recruitment is changing to adapt to these new needs, particularly in youth segments. To really bring the next generation of volunteers in, we have to try to look into new methods of attracting new people to committees. For example, you can ask a volunteer who's tried to get a one-off committee and see how many people step in.
Yeah.
Often not so many,
often
none.
It's a joke. And the one I laugh at is I'm on a few volunteering committees, and the one that's really tough is that it seems like there's always new burdens coming down. There's new requirements around child safety or safety on premise. And when you go to a volunteer and say it's time to get out, as in I've had enough, I've done my 5 years, you just can't. You hit the AGM and no one puts a hand up. It's really tough.
And we're in a position where there's all these burdens about child safety, as you said, and about these new administrative burdens, but there's no real support coming from anyone to help these volunteering organizations actually achieve those goals and actually fulfill those requirements. So there's all this unnecessary burden placed on people who are already under stress due to COVID, already leaving, and already not attracting the next generation of volunteers. So it's a whole storm of problems happening all at once.
Yeah, but there's an interesting thing that's taking place. There's a wider social good consideration that I think we all, as communities, need to consider. The sentiment across business, investors, philanthropists, social orgs, and all these sorts of institutions are that they want to support volunteering and social good in communities. They just don't have the methods to easily affect it.
And we see this pressure everywhere. Stakeholders, governments, investors are pushing for corporations to fulfill their ESG, their environmental, social governance mandates. But there's no real sort of framework to actually do this on a global scale in a way that actually makes sense across all sectors. ESG is super fuzzy and it's been hard to measure. Everyone struggles to easily and effectively support social impact in hyper-local communities. It's easy to say you give this much to charity or support your employees to do this activity, but you can't actually say how much activity is happening in the real local communities. And even these communities themselves, with local small businesses, struggle with how they support their neighborhoods and their friends in clubs and communities. Current support of local community is fragmented and poorly distributed, as we found.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough out there.
Okay, great. So what solutions do you have to offer problems in the volunteering space?
Well, this is where it gets fun, because in truth, we're tapping into the social psychology of volunteering. Whilst you look at the intrinsic values that volunteers have about helping their communities, the one thing that we've identified is that they actually feel like they're the one doing the job of the many. And so what that means is that they actually feel like they're different. They're not out to get big rewards. They're not out there to get trophies, but they always sit back and go, why doesn't Charlie just give a little bit more? And so we're tapping into that psychology by saying, let's try and think about giving them a gold card in a two-sided marketplace where organizations give what they have in spare capacity and share capacity, and we can get into that a little bit later. But those elements of reward and value we're going to give to volunteers directly through a gold card. That gold card is based around how they contribute and how they validate their time in volunteering. It's a separation between them, the doers, and the not doers.
So at its core, we're just taking this value which society has about volunteers, everyone wanting to support hyperlocal communities, and the volunteers themselves stuck in their communities, unable to support, by creating a simple yet powerful two-sided marketplace that is social focused and sustainable, that allows organizations and individuals to easily support volunteers and their communities. It's the care, share, and spare economy.
It is. And so that's volunteer hours validated equals access to network benefits. That means volunteers hours validated, access to exclusive products and services. And volunteer hours validated, a simple way to support volunteering communities, because the S is now measurable in ESG.
So all we do right now is we gamify the actual application process of recording your time in your local communities. And in exchange for recording your time and showing real impact, real verified impact in your community, you get access to all sorts of network effects, exclusive products, and a means to support yourselves and the organizations that you care about.
Intrinsic with a little bit of extrinsic. The WIFM, the what's in it for me for the young generation.
That's awesome. So if it has, how has your approach been influenced by the Start Bootcamp mentors that you spoke with on selection day?
Look, to start with, it was a real challenge. It was a tight window that we had to get ready for, and that drove us to really refine our message. So out of the block, Start Bootcamp, hats off. Thank you very much. You made us really tighten our messaging. But out the back of the actual pitches and the conversations we've had externally, the conversation around intrinsic and extrinsic value was one I leaned into a lot personally, and I think we will as an organisation lean into. The second one was the tightening of our message, getting the message tight. And then there was one third, which I really loved because I got really pumped out of the back of that. And what was that?
Oh, it was just go hard because the world needs it. At the end of the day, just that understanding that you have all these people who really have seen it all in sport, who are very acutely aware of the volunteers and their role in sports and the role in their communities themselves through their pro bono work, you know, to see the value in that, to get that sort of validation that we're not crazy and that we are onto something is powerful in itself.
Yeah, I think this sentiment is pretty obvious. Without volunteers, our sporting communities don't exist.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's great. And then what was your main goal that you hope to accomplish through the Start Bootcamp Accelerator program?
Well, our main goal from our perspective is to try and really define what our MVP is, our perfect experiment. And I think there's a couple we can do with the partners and the mentors within the SBC program. So we want to tighten the design of that experiment, and then find those people in the Start Bootcamp and wider audience that can help us get there.
And so we boiled that down into three core things. And that would be connection with influencers who see the value in supporting grassroots volunteers and community organizations. The Startup Bootcamp's connections with potential financial contributors who want to take a bet on the rise of social impact that we see throughout the world and an easy means to sponsor that. And connection with major brands and entities who can add value through our unique grassroots sponsorship programs and value proposition that boosts our network and provides these volunteers in the communities with that sort of value that keeps coming back for more and more and more, with the more and more being more volunteering in their communities.
Yeah, and the essence, going back to our statement, is that if you care, you'll give up some of your share and spare capacity.
So for one last fun question, we were wondering, who is your sporting hero?
You can't ask me for a single sporting hero. Sorry about that. Being a mad tennis guy, first and foremost, I lean into that sport. As I grew up, I had the good fortune of being and playing Pat Rafter and watching him develop from a 16-year-old that was okay to becoming world number one. You've got to take your hat off to any guy, girl, or anyone in sport that has the grit and determination to take a game that doesn't typically win to become the world number one. So that's one of my big ones. And the other one is Roger Federer, the ultimate statesman. There is not one sporting code in the world that would not want Roger Federer to be their statesman at the top. He's a professional on the court and off the court, and he's just a genuine, solid human. I have one other, and it's a personal one. It's my grandma, and my grandma had 9 hole-in-ones. So I've got to give her a tick because that's pretty hard to do.
Well, for me personally, you know, I love my sport, but I love probably not as much as sport mad Courtney. I will say, though, my number one sportsman of all time, or sports person of all time, would be Herschel Gibbs, for just being the greatest cricket player, or one of the greatest, most talented cricket players of his generation, or all time, with no attitude to go with it. And I will mirror in saying Roger Federer in that, I always look up to the best and the people who get to the best without an attitude to go with it. And so for that reason, I wouldn't say someone like John McEnroe.
Or even curious.
Or even curious.
Thank you guys so much. Those were all great answers, and we're so excited to see where the Start Bootcamp accelerated process takes you.
Well, look, Shannon, we have to echo that sentiment. We're super excited. We really like to be dragged into a pointy end, a thin edge of the wedge where we have to action against a set of milestones and timelines. So we're looking forward to it.
Absolutely. We know that once we pull through the startup program, we know, like, we might not know what will come out of it, but we know it'll be high quality, it'll be perfectly refined, and we're looking forward to the whole process. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
See ya.